I didn't, but there you go. Now it is. We do record the actual meeting. We've learned to turn it off for the after chats. So there you go. With no further ado, Rick, I'm going to stop sharing so that you can start sharing.
See here. Okay. Let me
Welcome,
see.
Rick Strahl. Woo!
I can just hear the applause. There must be hundreds, I say.
Thousands, maybe.
Yeah. Well, this is great. I can pretend at least I'm really famous.
Oh, you're fine. Don't worry about that.
Yeah, so this is my first time that I do this. So this is kind of interesting. I mean, a presentation to more than, a handful of people. So this is kind of interesting. Let me see if I can't share. It says host disabled.
Well, let's see if host can enable then. Because
that would be nice.
Host should be doing that. That would suck if we didn't have the ability to share. I think that's one of those new, probably one of those new features that's keep us safe from people who are.
Oh yeah, here we go.
Got it now?
Yeah.
Okay. There we go. That's much better.
Okay. All right. Let me see. Can I move this thing over to the other screen? That works. I think that's going to be much better. Can you still see?
Yep.
Still see my PowerPoint slide, right?
Yes.
Okay.
And I see that's basically what the view is ahead of you that we can't see, right?
Yes.
Nice. All right.
All right. So I guess let's just get started without a show of hands and all those things that I usually do. So I'm going to be talking about using Dotnet Tools, which is a feature of the .NET SDK. So it's built into .NET, and it allows you to build basically executables that you can easily share via NuGet, essentially, and then use some of the built-in tooling to install and manage the applications that you installed that way. So it's really great technology for building small tools and just in general, sharing executables and getting them out to share either with other people or within the organization. So the elevator pitch for this technology is basically this. So this is kind of my interpretation of it, and I'm just going to read this off because this is a one-time thing. Dotnet Tool is a glorified .NET Core application that can be easily shared and installed via NuGet and the .NET SDK. So when we really look at what that technology is, there's nothing really fancy to it, but it's really cool because it's easy to use because you already know how to do it. If you've ever built a NuGet component, you already know how to build a .NET tool because it uses basically exactly the same technology. If you've ever built a console application in .NET or specifically in .NET Core, you can also publish a .NET tool and make that available and immediately make that available to other people to consume and download and use. And that kind of sharing is really important, I think, for a development environment or as a platform in general, because it makes it really easy to have a community around things that everybody needs to do, but nobody has time to build all these little things, but somebody probably has thought of something and built that already. So essentially, this technology works with binary files. And what that means is you got to build something that's executable. That could be a console application. That could even be a Windows Forms or a WPF application, and it even works with that. But unlike a console application, if you build a Windows Forms application or a WPF application, those are going to be platform specific. Anything else that you build, if you build a console application, that's going to be cross-platform capable, just like any other .NET Core component. Now, what's nice about the technology is that it actually provides you with a platform agnostic launcher. And what that means is that you can build your application once and deploy it to .NET Tool, the .NET Tool infrastructure on NuGet, and you'll be able to consume it basically on any of the platforms that support it. Now, that's different than when you build a console application, right? If you build console exe and you want to run it on Windows, you actually have to build a Windows executable. And then if you want to also run that on Linux, well, you also have to build an executable that runs on Linux. So the tooling actually makes that completely transparent by providing you with a launcher that automatically does that for you. So the nice thing about it, of course, is that you can share. So the tools are very easy to create. So if you've ever built a NuGet component, you already know how to do that. If you've ever built a NuGet component and published it, you already know how to publish a .NET tool. So it's existing technology that makes that possible. And then once you've published it, it's super easy to actually consume that functionality because there's a single command, .NET Tool install, and that will allow you to install any of the components that are available. And then once it's installed, you can simply run it using the command that is assigned to that. So that's sort of like an executable, and the tooling will actually create an executable that matches that command. And that's, again, that platform independent executable that is created for you. It's easy to update. There's a .NET Tool update command, and then you can also easily uninstall it by using .NET Tool uninstall. So this is all very beneficial if you think about it, right? It makes it very easy to build a tool and very easy to consume it. So easy to share, easy to get it out there. And if you publish to NuGet, all that becomes available within literally minutes. So if you publish something, it can be immediately consumed like a few minutes later as soon as it's published and available. So there's no store process. There's no verification of that executable that you publish. It just goes up and works just like a NuGet package. Nobody reviews that package or says there's potentially dangerous stuff in there, but you can just execute that. So it's not a generic application manager because it does require the .NET SDK, okay? So what that means is you need to have the SDK installed, and that's important, right? So if you think of this as a way to distribute an application to an end user, that's probably not gonna work. But if you're building tools or something that's geared at developers, especially .NET developers, it's probably, you can probably assume, number one, that the .NET Core SDK may be installed, or if not, maybe you can impose on your users to actually install the SDK and make it available for your, to run your application. So did I just describe NPM? Yes, I did, because basically .NET Tool is very much like NPM for .NET Core. Essentially, for those of you that don't know what NPM is, it's basically the node package manager, which provides that same functionality. You can build node components, and then there's a package manager that you can publish to, and you can then consume those same NPM packages. Now, the benefit, of course, for .NET developers is that this is .NET Core specific. So we can use it with .NET components. And of course, we can take advantage of all the cool features that .NET provides without the dependency hell that is NPM and Node in general, or a JavaScript ecosystem in general. So the benefits of this, of course, is that, number one, it's super, super easy to build. I mean, you already know how to do this, and we already talked about this. You can very easily share it. So there's no store review process, as I mentioned. And so it's very easy to get it out to a lot of people at the same time. And that makes it possible to build a community around it, which means that more people can very easily publish these kind of tools and make them available for everyone to consume. So there's lots of little tools available already, and I'll show you some places where you can look later. And of course, you can build your own tools and very easily just build them locally and then distribute them for other people in your team. Or I frequently build tools just so I can use them on another machine later on, because it's a really easy way to actually share that the package and install it on another machine, for example. So what is this technology really designed for? I mean, you can basically package up any executable, but practically, there's a few limitations because of the SDK requirement that I mentioned earlier. So originally, when this was built into the .NET framework, I think the idea was to build specific tools that are really meant for the development process. So there are some things that you might be familiar with that are .NET tools. For example, the .NET migration tooling, .NET EF. That's actually a .NET tool that just happens to be now, at least, installed by default. So when you install the .NET Core SDK, it automatically installs that. But it's basically built as a tool just like any other. It's just pre-installed. Same with .NET Watch. That used to be a separate tool that you had to install, and now it just comes built in. There's a number of other tools for third-party components. For example, the Cake tooling for the Cake build system. There's a .NET Cake command that you can use, and that's something that you explicitly install, but it can then be invoked through the build pipeline the same way as some of these other tools. Then there's generic command line tools, right? So if you need to build some tools that kind of go beyond what you would normally do with PowerShell or Bash, but you would rather use a full .NET environment to build those kind of things, that's the kind of stuff you can build with .NET Tools. So I have a few things that I've built. For example, I've built an HTML packager that takes content from a website and packages that up into a single file or a single package. That's something that I built as a component, but I actually needed that at one point to be able to use that as well in another application, in another script, actually. And so I simply packaged it up as a .NET tool, and I was able to call it from another PowerShell script that actually was able to consume that. So it's very easy to publish stuff like that and make these utilities available in a development environment. And this is maybe the most exciting part of it, to me anyway, is that if you are building these tools, you can use all of .NET Core, which means you can build full-on servers. You can build an ASP.NET application and build a server that you can then run locally completely. So you can entirely run that application on a local machine. So you can build local server applications that you just browse locally. So instead of building maybe a desktop application, you just can build actually a local server application that's a web application, and then have a browser that automatically opens and starts that application up. And then there's also the situation of hybrid applications where you have a desktop UI that actually interacts with a server that runs in the background. So you can easily build a server for that and make that available as well. So there's lots of things that you can do here. And I'll show you a couple of other examples of a tool that is basically a local static web server that you can build generically and then do some cool stuff with that to expand on the functionality. And finally, it is also possible to launch UI applications. I didn't actually know that that works. And if you look on the documentation online, you'll find that that's not the original scenario for it, but it does actually work. So if you build a .NET Core-based WinForms or WPF application, that will launch as well. So you can use that same delivery mechanism to create a small utility application that maybe requires some UI for some reason that is not able to do it via the command line. And you can do that and just have that publish that and then also consume that WinForms or WPF application. Now, obviously, when you do this, you lose the cross-platform capability. And you do have to make sure that you have the right runtime installed. So the .NET Core SDK installs the desktop runtimes at this point. But I think in .NET Core 5, that will go away. So in that case, you will have to make sure that when you distribute your application, that the appropriate runtime is installed. Also, if you build a 32-bit WinForms or a WPF application for whatever reason, and there might be some, for me there is, you also need to be sure that the appropriate runtimes are installed. So the SDK may only be 64K, and then you will not have the right runtimes installed. So you just have to make sure that those runtimes are also installed. Okay. I don't know. Do we do questions, Rich? If anybody has any. Oh, you're muted.
I'm unmuted. I'm ready. If people have questions, I should have said this out loud earlier, but if anyone has questions, feel free to raise your hand in the participant section or chat it on here, and I will pass it along or make sure that we know there's a question to ask. I don't know, Rick, if you're watching that closely or not, but
yeah, I don't know. I'm having a bit of a hard time seeing the other screen. So
Oh yeah, no
if you
worries.
could just forward to me, that would be great.
I will make sure you're aware if anything
I
comes
should have looked at that before. I was a bad boy. I was not paying attention.
up. No worries.
All right, so in the next section, I just want to go over and actually talk about what it takes to build these and actually look at the mechanics of it. So we're going to look at some, well, not exactly code, but we'll look at some of the project settings. And then after that, we'll look at some of the examples. Okay, so in order to build a .NET tool, you use the standard .NET Core projects, basically. So if you've built a console application, you already know what it takes to build this. So the only thing that really needs to change in a .NET Core project is, that's an executable, is that you add this pack as tool tag to the project. And then once you build the project, it will create then a NuGet package that gets output into the build folder. And I'll talk about more about that and some of the things you might want to do with this. There's a few other things that you probably want to set. But the most important thing to set is this pack as tool command that goes into the project file that basically tells the .NET compiler, the project compiler, the build system, that we need to pack this particular component as a NuGet package that is marked with the .NET tooling so that it can get published in a different way to the server when it gets published. So then once you have the binary built, there's going to be a NuGet package, and you just package that up the same way as you would and send it to the NuGet site. So you publish that component basically. And there's a couple of ways to do it, and I'll show those in a minute as well. And then finally, you use some of the tool commands to install, update, uninstall, and list the commands. So let's take a look at that. So let me jump over here into Visual Studio for a second and just pull up a project that I mentioned earlier. This is that HTML package that I was talking about earlier. Okay, so this is basically a console application. So there's a few projects in here. There is a core project that provides basically the API functionality of the packaging of the components that I was talking about. So basically what this tool does, it goes in, you point it at a URL, and it will pull all the files that are associated with that down either into a folder, or you can package it all into a single very, very large HTML file that has all the dependencies embedded inside of it as binary files or the CSS files, and everything goes into a single package. So the idea is basically that you can take something that comes from a website and get something self-contained that you can browse offline on your local machine. So it's kind of the same behavior that you have with save as in a browser. So interactively, there's ways to do that sort of thing, obviously. Save as browser is built into every browser, and it works pretty well. But if you need to do that programmatically from an application, this is what this is for, essentially. So there's a library that's also a NuGet component, and that's published. But then I take that library and wrap it into a console application, which is basically just this, right? It's a static void main plain console application. And inside of that application here, I just have the HTML package processor, and I call the process method. And it basically takes the command line parser that has all the parameters that it can pass to it. And then it figures out what it can do with those parameters to create this thing. I'll show a little bit about how this works later, but let's just talk about what it takes to actually build this thing. So if we look at this project here, you see it's the csproj file here, right? It's an output type.exe of type exe, which means it produces a .NET Core app and a 3.1 version here of an exe. And in this case, it's a console application because I just pointed at that static main that just goes off and does its thing directly in the console application. And then these are the things that are specific here to building a .NET tool or a NuGet package that is a .NET tool. So the first thing is that pack as tool that I mentioned, right? So that basically tells the compiler that it needs to create a NuGet package, and it needs to be marked with the .NET tooling. So the next thing that you provide is the package ID. So this is basically a NuGet tag, and that just tells it what the ID for the actual that you see on NuGet when you publish this component. So when you install this, it'll be .NET install -g .NET HTML packager. So this is the command that you use to install. Now, if the project name is different from the tool command name, and I like to provide this anyway, just to make sure there's nothing funny going on between the package ID. I can never remember what determines the actual name. So if you provide the tool command name, this will be the command that you actually execute the command with. So when I want to run the application later on, then I just run HTML packager from the command line. And it will figure out, it will figure out the exe that it needs to run on Windows in this case, based on this launcher that I mentioned earlier. I also recommend that when you build, that you build into a separate folder rather than the default release output folder, because the release output folder is like buried like 5 levels deep below the release package. And I like to put it into a location that's a little bit easier to access, right? So it goes here. It ends up being right there in that location inside of the main project. And then you also want to set generate package on build. And again, that's just so that when you compile the project, every single time you build, that NuGet package will get updated. So if I go in here, and I change the version number and rebuild, you can see the package number should change here. Well, actually, it should create another package, and the package number will be new for that. Okay, so there is my new package that was just created. So if we jump out here and go into the folder structure here, and we take a look. So here's our packages that were built. I'm just going to delete this one. If I just double click this thing, I have a tool installed called the NuGet Package Explorer, which is great for looking at a package and seeing what's inside of it. But you can also use this tool to sign and eventually publish your component if you want to. So this works for NuGet packages as well as .NET Tools. And if you drill into this thing, you can see what actually gets packaged inside of here. And as you can see, it's pretty small. There's basically all of my dependencies, my direct dependencies that are not part of the .NET Core runtime that get pulled into this NuGet package. Same thing as a NuGet package, right? It pulls in all the dependencies that it needs unless you reference that as an external component, and then it will be pulled in. So here, when you build this package, everything has to be in the build folder, or it has to be part of the package. So any dependencies you use will end up in this component. If you use a NuGet package, then everything that is external and is also a NuGet package, it will be an external reference that gets pulled in when the project actually gets installed. But because this is not a component, but a self-contained executable essentially, or a wrapper of it anyway, it needs to have all of its dependencies. So all the things that you need that are associated with this end up inside of here. I'll show a little bit later why this is important and why you want to think about this a little bit. Because when you build some components, you'll find that there's a lot of stuff that all of a sudden gets pulled into this. So this package is really small, right? If we go over here, you see it's 106K, pretty small. But some other ones that I have, as we'll see later, can be like rather large. It's like 10 megs or something like that, because it pulls in a whole bunch of the .NET Core, well, actually the ASP.NET components that I use in one of the other components that I'm going to show. Okay, so then if I want to, I typically want to sign my package. So I can go and use my code signing certificate. So this thing is already signed, but I basically pick my certificate. I say OK, and then sign, and it will sign this component. So it's already signed. Actually, let me rebuild this, and then we can do this one more time. So it should be pretty quick. So if we go in here, and let's open that again. I can show you how that actually works. And so if we go in here and sign, I pick my certificate, say OK, sign, and I have to resave it, save. Yep, the name exists already. And if you look here, you notice that it hasn't been signed yet. But once I click yes, now you can see my publisher name shows up here and my signing certificate was assigned. Now, I'm not sure exactly how this works. If you don't have a publisher certificate, I think you can create a you can create a local certificate and that works as well. It just has to be signed with something. I don't think it has to be a verified actual signing certificate that is with a publisher, a public publisher like this. Okay, so once you've done this, now you have a full component and you can go out and actually publish. So from here, the NuGet Package Explorer also lets you publish. And when I click this button, it would now go off and send that up to NuGet. Now, I don't want to do this because there's nothing actually changed in here. But if I did this, it just would go almost immediately go off to the server and be done. And then within like 5 minutes or so, that component would actually be available for us to consume. Oops, so let me just delete that. All right, and let me set this version number back. Now, there's a couple of other things here that are interesting that you can do. Now, number one is you can actually, when you're testing these things, you probably don't want to push them to NuGet right away, but you rather want to try it out locally and see how this works as a .NET tool. So what you can do is you can use this .NET Tool command to update your component or install your component. So I haven't really talked about the actual syntax. So the syntax to do this is .NET Tool. So that's the .NET SDK command that you can use. And then there's install or update. And update actually will both install and update. If the component doesn't exist, it will install it. And if it does exist, then it will update it to the latest version if that's available. Okay, so you do update. And then the G means global, which makes this component available globally. If you leave out the G, the component will be installed locally into your project, essentially, and it will only be visible to your project. All right, so then that's the name of the package that you want to install, right? That goes back to that NuGet package. So it's .NET HTML Packager, and that's what we're using here. And remember, the package name and the tool command may not be the same necessarily. They could be potentially different. And then you say you can install this component from a NuGet package source that you specify. So in this case, all I say is I want to use this folder as my package source. Right? So I'm just pointing it at another folder to install from. So if I open up this window here, Alt-W, so I can now do .NET, well, actually, let's just copy this here. If I do this here, we can just run this. And so it basically reinstalled the version that was already there. Okay, so now this tool is installed. And again, notice here, I can also, oops, go .NET Tool list. And if I just list like this, you notice there's nothing there because I didn't actually provide the G. So I'm not looking locally, I'm just looking for this folder. And then if I go G, then there's a whole bunch of things that are installed locally. And there you see the .NET EF that I mentioned earlier. You see the cake tool that I mentioned, and then a few other things that are specific to my own installation and a few other things. Okay, so I can list and see all the components that are installed. So I can also say .NET uninstall, oops, let's see here. Let's do .NET HTML Packager -G, and then if I, oops, .NET Tool. Okay, so now it's uninstalled. If we go back to tool list, you see it's gone. And now if I go back to the previous command here, the update command, if I do it again, you can see it'll reinstall it now. And it will pull it down from that NuGet package. Now, if I do this one more time, let me uninstall. And now let's take off this thing here. Okay, so now I pulled up my local package store. I'm going to say, go ahead and install it from the NuGet repository. So this is from the original repository in the cloud. And that's pulling it down from NuGet.org now. Okay, so that's pretty cool, right? We can basically install a component update a component, and then also list all the components that are available. When you look at the list, just to be clear here one more time, notice here that there's a package ID that you can see over here, and then the commands that are actually different. Okay, so my component here, let me run this again. Let's refresh that. So here's my HTML packager, right? Notice it's .NET HTML packager, but the command is HTML packager. So if I want to run this component now, I can just go HTML packager, and there's my command that just ran. Okay, so this is that HTML packager that I mentioned. And so you can see it just ran basically as a console application. And if you don't provide any parameters here, it just shows you the help page. So if I want to run this, let me pull up a command line here. If I want to run this and run it against a website, just run it against Hanselman's website. You can see what this actually looks like. So if I go down here and I run this, what I'm going to do is I'm going to point at Hanselman's website and then capture the output into a folder here, basically. So it's going through and capturing all this information. Now it's relatively slow because it does have to go one by one, because it has to embed all the values that it's capturing into the final output document. So we can't do it actually asynchronously easily, because we have to get these things one at a time. Okay, so it's going to do this. And then when it's done, we can go into the temp folder here. And there's that captured.html file. And if I open this up, there is Hanselman's website, entirely local in a single HTML file. Okay, so that's pretty cool, right? I mean, it's nothing fancy, but it's a nice way to share this component and be able to access that just through a little tool that's available. Now you can call this from another script, and you would be able to actually access that functionality quite easily. Okay? That all makes sense so far? Any questions? Now that we got a little bit into this. No questions, all right.
I'll just provide a comment. That's cool.
Let me go back to my slides.
Cool stuff, Rick.
Okay, so let's take a look and see what we did here. Okay, so then the first thing is you go into the project and you set the pack as tool to true. You want to provide a package ID and the command name if it's different, or just to be safe, always provide it. If you typically want to provide a separate path where you put this so you can easily get at the package so that you don't have to dig down into finding it. And then make sure that when you build, you actually create a NuGet package each time that you do. Okay? Then once you're done, it creates that NuGet package, puts it in the folder that you specified, if you specified one. Otherwise, it's buried in the release folder and the runtime version and the platform and everything else. And then you can use either the package explorer, as I've done here, or you can use command lines to do this as well. Let me actually show you that. If we go back into Visual Studio here, I have another script that lets you publish that directly from within a script that you can run. So basically, there is a NuGet command that you can use to sign, right? You can execute the NuGet command and then provide a file name, a certificate name, and a timestamp server. And then when you're all done with that, you can just go ahead and NuGet push. And you just need to make sure that your NuGet publishing ID is set previously to the push. So this basically does the same process that I went through in the Package Explorer, just using a script, basically a PowerShell script. Okay? All right. So here's again all the commands that you can use. There's .NET Tool install, .NET Tool update, which is basically install and update all rolled into one. Uninstall and list, those are useful for managing basically, right? You can get things installed and take them off very easily. And then if you need to install from a local folder, just add the add source at the end and point it at the folder. And this is great for debugging. You can list. All right. There's one more thing I wanted to show. Hang on a second here. I forget what it is, but I know I'm missing something. Oh yeah, how does this work? And so where is that slide? Okay, well, we'll come back to that. Here we go. We'll come back to the other thing. So when we run the component, all we use is the tool name, right? So in this case here, I'm using HTML packager, and then you use the command line that you would normally use with that executable. So if you're using a console application, as I'm doing here, you just specify the command line parameters as you normally would. Nothing different there once you launch it. So when you run this tool, I mentioned earlier, you're not actually running an exe of that. Well, you are, but it's not what you published. If you look back on that package explorer, we still have that open? No, let me open that back up. If we go in here and we go inside here, if you look inside of here, inside of this package, you'll notice that there's no exe inside of here, right? So there's nothing executable inside of this package itself. So the package just has the .NET assemblies, and that's what actually makes it possible for this thing to run as a standalone. Okay, so then how does it actually get to execute? And the way that this works is essentially that when .NET Tool is installed, it basically gets put into this tools folder in the user folder. So there's a .NET folder with tools inside of it, and every one of the tools that is installed basically gets this little wrapper exe that gets installed there. And basically what that is a launcher. It is a .NET runtime bootstrapper, and it's just a shell. And as you can see here, it's not actually a .NET component. That's a native executable for each platform. And that allows you to actually run that application. And this path here that you see up here, this .NET Tools, that folder is mapped into the OS path. So every time you execute any of these exes or any of these commands, they will be accessible in the .NET path, and that makes them available. And where's all the rest of the components installed? So all the stuff that we had in the Package Explorer when we were looking at the actual component, it's inside of the store. So there's a separate folder for each package, and then inside of that package is the assembly related stuff that is actually the the binaries that are being executed by this loader. So this is basically a runtime loader that bootstraps the .NET runtime and then executes the main entry point, and off we go. Okay, so now I need to back up. So as I mentioned, there's a .NET Tool list command which lists your local tools, right? That's useful. You want to know what's installed locally, and also it makes it easy to uninstall things that you may no longer need. So some tools you'll find they're migrant. In other words, you use them once or twice and then you're done with them. Some of them are, migration tools like this project 2015-2017 migrator. So this basically takes an old school project and turns it into a SDK project, which is quite useful. And so there's a number of tools that are available that are kind of a one-time use. So it's very nice that you can list the tools and then be able to uninstall them afterwards. But if you wanted to actually look up components and actually find the tools that are available, you'll find that if you go to the NuGet site, oh, I have to get out of here. Oops. If you go to the NuGet site, there's no way to actually search for packages or for tools. If you put in tools, there's nothing that actually helps you with that. There's a number of things that are tools, but they're not .NET tools specifically. So although the NuGet packages are marked, there's no way to search for them on the NuGet site, at least at this point. Now, somebody's told me that that's something that's coming at some point in the future. There'll be more search options. But you can click this thing and it doesn't do anything. You really need some filtering here. And then, of course, there's the crazy NuGet search that returns the strangest results in some cases, even if you put in, well, it returns the exact match, but a partial match is always crazy. But that's a whole nother story. So anyway, you can't find what you need here. But what you can do is you can go to this toolget site, and in here you can actually search. So you can search for, you know, if I want to find my live reload server, for example, I can put that in, and there's my live reload server here. Or if I want to look for my HTML packager, I can find that. Now I know the name of this, and in NuGet I would be able to find that by name, but if you don't know the name, then it's nice to be able to have a more realistic search. Another site that's really useful is this site here, which is Nate McMaster's Dotnet Tools site, and basically has a list of a whole bunch of tools that are available. And this is really useful because it has a description of everything, and you can actually just browse through this, and it's quite useful to find things on here. So I just added my live reload server here. I didn't actually know this was here either. So I'm hoping that just pointing it out here might be news to you as it was to me probably a week ago when I started looking at this. Okay, so that's quite useful. Let me see here. My PowerPoint skills have left me. So there's those two sites, and the URLs are up here if anybody wants to jot that down. Okay, again, do we have any questions? Rich?
There are no questions currently.
Can't hear you.
I thought I had one. Hang on, for myself though.
You're not muted, but I still can't hear you.
Well, that's weird. Hang on.
Did I lose you?
No.
Can anybody else hear you?
I can hear Rich.
Oh, other people can hear me.
Yeah, loud and clear.
Huh.
Yeah, I can hear Rich too.
Huh.
I can't hear you. I hope everybody can still hear me. Okay, well, let's just keep going then, I guess, and we'll come back to this later. Not sure what's happening. The important thing is I can keep talking, right? Blah, 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 blah. Okay, so I want to show a few examples of some things that I've built. And I already showed one of them, which was the HTML packager, so I'm not going to go over that one. But let's take a look at some of these things. So one of the tools that I've built is a Visual Studio snippet converter. And by the way, all of these are open source, so you can go look them up on GitHub. And there's links in all the stuff that I'm talking about here for the session notes, the slides, and also all the links that I've mentioned. They're all on the GitHub site that is linked to this, this talk. So I'll show those at the end again, and I'll leave that up for a while so you can jot that down. But all of this is accessible, and you can take a look at those things if you're more interested in that. So one of the tools that I've built is this Visual Studio snippet converter. And what this thing does is basically it takes Visual Studio snippets and converts them to other formats or into other dev environments. So I switch back and forth between development environments all the time. So in Windows, I tend to use Visual Studio. If I'm on a Mac or on a Linux machine, I tend to use Writer for .NET development. And if I'm sometimes I just use Visual Studio Code if I'm just quickly looking at something. And I find it really nice to be able to have all the snippets that are built into, well, that I've created for Visual Studio and have them available somewhere else as well. Not only that, but I also like to have one source that I can start with and then share my snippets out to some other source. So since I started with Visual Studio, I have a ton of those things. You can see them over here in the folder. For my Visual C++, C# ones, and then I have a ton of HTML ones and other ones as well. And I can basically take these and move them over into, for example, Visual Studio Code. And so that's what this particular component does. Okay, now this is a typical component that exemplifies what this technology was originally built for, which is a developer tool. Right? I mean, it's for developers, obviously. You have to have Visual Studio, otherwise you wouldn't be using Visual Studio snippets. And so you take those snippets and convert them. And if we want to run this, let me drop down back to my command window here if I still have it open. I guess oops, where is it? There. Can everybody see okay? I guess I should have asked, but everything's big enough, right? All right. You're doing a good job, Rich. Okay, I need to switch one more time. I'm going to drive everybody dizzy. So in the snippet converter here, I can, for example, do this command line, which what this does basically, it tells me that I want to take all the snippets in the my code snippet, in the Visual C# my code snippets folder, and then convert them into VS Code snippets, which is the default, and name the snippets that are created www C# code snippets. So if I open this folder here, I just want to make sure that the snippets got deleted. Okay, they already exist because I had to test it again. You can see I have my actual snippets up here, and I just renamed them so we can do this.
Now we have a problem. Are people hearing me right now? Anyone?
I can
Yes,
hear
I
you,
can
Rich.
hear you, Rich.
Rick, your
Yeah.
audio's off.
Yeah. Hey, Rick.
Rick, your audio's off.
We gotta call
Turn
attention.
off his screen sharing. That'll get him.
I don't know if it will. Yeah, there you go. Highlight him, maybe. I don't know if he'll see it though, does he? Let's see. Maybe chat him up on Twitter.
There we go.
Oh, I hear him now.
Let me see.
Okay, yeah, we're hearing.
Here.
Heard for a second there. Go ahead.
Oh, now it's off. Oh. Oh,
That is most unusual.
Trying.
Oh, that was Rick, right? Try again, Rick.
Select the speaker, select the microphone.
yeah,
Try that again.
Rick.
How about that? Yes? That's weird. It just disconnected.
Can you hear me now by chance?
And I still can't hear you, though. There we go. I can hear you on my little speaker, but for some reason, all the sound just died, and now it came back. All right. Are you there, Rich?
Yes.
Yeah, I can hear you now.
Yeah. Okay, good. We're getting there.
Can you go back a few minutes?
Yeah, go back just to this section. That's when it went quiet for a bit.
Okay, so basically, I'm going to open a folder here just so we have some code. If I go inside of here, I can now pull up one of these snippets, right? I mean, oops, why did I end up here? No, not that. In code, if I go in here, I can now use one of these snippets if I want to. So if I go into some of the code here, if I go into program and go to the bottom here, maybe, or let's go in and add a property here. So if I go pro IPC, so there is a shortcut that was out of that particular component. So that's basically a snippet that's now available. And so all the snippets basically that were there are available inside of here. So it's pretty cool that you can do that. It's not something that you're going to use every day. And I also know that a lot of people don't use the snippets, which is kind of weird because it's pretty useful. It's a very useful feature. And I don't know why more people don't use it in any of the tools. But I presume a lot of people are like me. They go between environments back and forth, and you go, damn, I can't use this here, so I might as well not use it anywhere, right? So maybe that's it. Anyway, that's what this tool does. So this is kind of a use case where you can see where a tool is used to basically perform the task that it was designed to, right? It's a development time tool that you use to enhance something that has to do with the development process. Then there's the HTML packager that we already showed. And I'm not going to show it again, but let me see if I can find my slides again here now. So the HTML packager is, as we have already seen, we can basically take any URL, and there's a number of different ways that you can take that document, the URL, and package it. So you basically can either contain a single document, which is what I did with Hanselman's site, or you can just tell it to generate a folder that has all the loose files that are associated in it, and then also create a zip file with the same thing. So this is more of a general purpose tool, an example of a general purpose tool, right? So this has really nothing to do with development. This is just something that maybe you need to capture something and you need to automate that, and that's what that really is for. So it's just another example of something a little bit different. The next example I have is a server that I've built. That's a generic .NET Core based static file web server. So basically, if you want to run a website that's local and it's just a bunch of HTML files, you can point this server at it, and it will basically allow you to surf that site in the browser. So it does a whole bunch of nice things for you. It automatically starts a browser after you start. It can use either a local connection, or it can actually be networked if you want to. So if you want to build an application that can be accessed maybe from your local internal network, you can expose it. You can expose a port to make it serve publicly. It has built-in live reload. So if you're a developer, you can automatically reload the pages as soon as they're changed in the browser. So as you make a change, immediately the page reloads. That's enabled by default. And then there's also loose razor page support. So if you need to do something dynamic in this quote unquote semi-static site, you can actually use some dynamic stuff inside of pages to do something like maybe pull a version number from Git, or pull a version number from your download site, or find out how many people have accessed a file because you have some sort of other mechanism to keep track of those sort of things. So you can call a service, pull information in, you can display a date that's proper. There's lots of things you can do that are just kind of minor things. So this is the typical quote unquote PHP model, right? Everything happens inside of a loose razor page. And what I mean by loose razor page is there can't be no code behind for these pages. They just have to be self-contained pages where everything is in line, essentially. And then it also has built-in Markdown support. Okay, and the server is called Live Reload Server. And then to run it, basically, all you do is point it at a folder with the web root, and it will run that folder. So let's go ahead and do that. Now I've really lost my, my command line here. So let's get out of here, start this up. So if I do live reload server and just point it at a folder, so I'm going to do web root. I'm going to fold it, point it at web connection, view web. So this is a sample site I built some site a while ago. If I just do that, and then, oh, did I not? What happened here? Wrong folder. There we go. Did I still not get it right? What did I do here? Web connection projects. I'll get it right one of these days. There we go. I got to give it the right folder name. Okay, so static HTML page. I can click through this and it all works. So this is actually a view application. So you can click and do all the things that you do in this application, and it just runs locally as a web server. So you basically do .NET install for this server, and then once you do the live reload server, and you can just point it at this location. Let me go back to my notes here, and let me pull up this example, which is a little more involved. So let me go back over here. So I can cancel out of here. Whoops. Let's paste this in. So here I'm going to point at the actual example that goes with this particular server. So if you install the sample from GitHub, you'll have this folder that has some examples. So if you run this again, I have to refresh here. Okay, so this is the live reload server sample page. And if you go in here, I can go again into a static page, and that works. And in this case, well, I'm accessing a razor page here, and that doesn't work because I didn't actually tell it to use the razor functionality, and likewise with the markdown functionality. But what I can do inside of here is if I go into this folder, well, actually, let me start up the rest of the server here. So let me kill this. And then if I go use razor and use markdown, then I also get this functionality that gets added here. So you can see now the use razor and the use markdown flags are set, and then there's a bunch of templates that are associated with the markdown. So if I reload this page now and I go to the razor page, now it will take a second to fire up for the first time, but once it's loaded, it's going to be relatively fast. So there's my razor page. So there's some dynamic stuff inside of here. And then also I can go in and basically point at an MD file. If you look at the status bar down here, you can see that I'm referencing a markdown file as an MD file. And it will render that markdown file, in this case, with the GitHub template. Okay. And if I go just display it as a path, here's, again, a different, well, it's the same one, but instead of a markdown page, it uses that as a path. And then here's a markdown document that I just took one of my, my blog posts that I keep as markdown files, and I basically put it in a folder along with all of its dependencies, and it just works. Okay, so it's an easy way to display markdown content in your browser. So what you can also do is you can, how should we do this? Let's open this up here. Let me see here. Where is this thing? I don't have it. Nope, I do. So if I go in here, nope, not in here. Samples, standalone files. I'm going to open this in Visual Studio Code. That's not the right place. That's not the one that I got. I hate when Visual Studio does that, Visual Studio Code. When you open it and there's one already open, it'll always go back to that one first. Why is it going here? Standalone files. This is right, but why is all this stuff open? That's weird. All right, let me close everything. And then let's just look at this standalone file sample. Okay, so let's go back into the HTML page here. Let's close all the others here. Okay, so let's open this up and put it over here. So let's go into the test HTML page. And if we go into test.html, and I move this over a little bit, we should be able to just go ahead and type in here. Oops. So first time, sometimes you have to. So any changes you make here immediately show up in there. If you make a change to a CSS file or a JavaScript file, it shows up immediately inside of there. If I go to the Razor page, I can do the same thing there. If I go to the Hello World CS HTML page and I go into the Razor page, make a change here. Uh-oh. Got it loaded once, maybe. Oh, that's strange. Huh. Well, it's supposed to do that. Let's do that one more time. So there's the change. Now, if I take it out, it's not working. I'm not sure why. Okay, that's not impressive. And I do this all the time, and now it doesn't work. It's great. All right, well, let's see if the markdown page works. So, oops, there's a Razor page that pulls something down. Here's the markdown page. Let's see if this works. Yeah, that works. So that's weird that the Razor page wouldn't work. I wonder if I was pointing at the right page. Am I making changes in the right page? I do want to go back. That seems very strange. So here's the Razor page. If I go in here and change that. There we go. I wonder if I was looking at the wrong file. I don't know. So it works. And then of course you can also go in because it is Razor, right? So I can say the time is, and then date, whoops, time.now, and maybe put an HR in here. So if we do that, and then, you know, there's the date time. And then if I maybe say toString, whoops. So there's the date and that formatted right? So any changes I make here basically immediately get done. Now that's pretty useful. I use this all the time for local development of stuff. If I'm just looking at something, it's really nice to have a quick web server. Now, there's other tools that do that sort of thing, but it's pretty nice to have it as a .NET Core component, and you can actually customize this. And in the next example that I actually show you where I take the same concepts that I'm using inside of here and build them to something that's more specific to an actual solution. Okay, so pretty straightforward, right? I mean, this is just another component. So this is a component that's a general purpose. It's a development tool, but it's a general purpose component. So again, it is a great tool to publish this way because it's easy for people to download this component. So one thing I wanted to point out with this is if we go to the live reload server here, so this is the project that actually contains the live reload server. If we go with the NuGet package here, you'll notice that this package is a lot bigger than the last one that we looked at, right? The other one was like 100K. This one is 10 megs. What the hell is in there? Well, it turns out because I'm adding Razor support and I need dynamic compilation of Razor components, I have to add the Razor runtimes in there, or the Razor runtime compilation support. So what you find is that there's a whole bunch of stuff related to the ASP.NET Core MVC Razor runtime compilation. And then there's also all of these dependency files that are associated with that. So this is the compiler framework that allows you to compile at runtime, which ASP.NET Core has disabled by default in ASP.NET Core 3.1. Used to work before that, but now those runtime options have to be explicitly enabled along with the assemblies that need to be packaged into that. Okay, so this package is not exactly small, but still, I mean, 10 megs is not too bad for something that comes down and is used. And it's a one-time install, obviously, so not a huge deal. Okay, so basically the live reload server, in summary, it's a nice .NET Core-based local web server you can use for any type of application that you need to run locally. It works with Angular applications, it works with Vue applications, it works with plain static sites. It works with Blazor sites, although with Blazor, the live reload is terribly slow because the compilation is terribly slow when you make changes to the actual code behind. And Razor doesn't have support for simply letting you change Blazor doesn't have support for letting you just change the CS.html file. It recompiles everything right now. So unfortunately, that is not a good use case for that. I mean, it will work, it'll just be slow. And there isn't really any alternatives that I know that make that better at this point. But I actually found out that this live reload functionality, the ASP.NET team just today posted that they're actually going to be looking at this, into integrating this, or not necessarily my code, but that same functionality, they're going to integrate it into the runtime directly or into the building tools directly. So in the next release, hopefully by 5.0, there'll be something like this actually built into the .NET Core runtime. So this package is actually made up of two components. So there is the live reload server, which is the standalone server. And then there's also a middleware piece to this that you can plug into your applications. So when you run your applications, you can enable this middleware, and it provides that natively to any MVC or Razor application that you can use. So then you get that functionality without having to run a separate server. You can use .NET Watch Run, or even the IIS Express web server and get that same functionality. It would be part of your application at development time. So lots of cool stuff. If you're interested in that, go check out the website for it. There's a ton of information available about that. Okay, so I have one more, so I'm going to go a little bit over the hour that I said. Is that okay? The last one is kind of a weird one. And I will say I'm pretty sure a few people are going to laugh at me, which is great. I love laughs. Pay Because I'm going to be talking about a legacy technology. And some of you probably still know me from my legacy days of doing FoxPro work, right? I know Rich is already snickering because he's heard this before.
FoxPro.
Yes. So I actually am the creator and maintainer of a tool that is still around, believe it or not, for a FoxPro tool that basically connects FoxPro to the web. And over the years, I've updated this technology to use, first .NET. I mean, originally it was ISAPI. Well, actually, before that, it was WS API, I think. I mean, this thing was built in 1995, so you get an idea how old this is. And this is technology that basically has survived merely on the fact, even though FoxPro has been dead for more than 10 years now, it has survived because it basically gives the ability to build a web application in Visual FoxPro. And now there's not a lot of good use cases for this anymore these days, but a few people still have existing sites that they built maybe 20 years ago or 15 years ago, and they need to continue using this technology. There's also a few people that just don't want to quit FoxPro. They still rather build something in FoxPro, and they're using this. So I still have, for this particular tool, hundreds of users that are paying customers and licenses that are associated with that. So this is worthwhile for me to maintain. It's also an awesome technology for me to go out and play with technology. And a lot of the functionality that you see in the live reload server that I just showed, which is a generic tool, has nothing to do with FoxPro, came from the work that I did here with this legacy application. So let me just briefly point out what it is. It's basically an interface that is a connector between the web server, a web server, and a FoxPro application server. So the FoxPro application server basically receives all the web server information and then uses its own framework, which is an MVC-like framework, or it has a REST framework, has a whole bunch of things that are very Microsoft-like, believe it or not. So you can use the same type of technologies, but you use FoxPro scripting, for example, instead of using C# or Razor. And you can build your REST services using FoxPro code instead of something else. So there's basically a FoxPro service that listens for requests that are sent to it. And in this case, the technology is either a file-based mechanism or COM-based servers that are called. And the FoxPro servers then process the request and pass it back to the server, and that goes out and actually processes these. So the way that it works is very similar to the live reload server, right? If you look at this here, you basically point it at a URL, and then that server fires up. Now, this technology is cool in this case because it allows you to do zero configuration setup. Because I know I own this server all on my own. It's .NET Core based, so I can build my server. I don't need IIS installed, so there's no configuration of IIS or having to install IIS locally for the development setup. So a user that gets started for the first time immediately can jump in and be productive because they don't have to screw around with configuration or whatnot. And then when they're running this, they can also deploy this new mechanism, this .NET Core-based server, to a production server. So if they do need to deploy to IIS, they can use that same .NET Core-based connector as middleware that is actually connecting the FoxPro server. So basically what this allows me to do is have an easy distribution mechanism for sending this information out to users. So all I have to tell them is install the .NET Core SDK and then download this component and go ahead and run, and you're done. You just point it at a folder and it will figure out all the rest of what it needs to do. So that's pretty cool. So let me just show you what this looks like. Again, this isn't going to be super impressive, but basically what I can do here is, whoops, go start up a command window, go start web connection web server. And then again, I go web root, should look familiar from the last demo, right? And I pointed at a web connection projects, www threads, and the web folder inside of it. Okay, when I do that, it fires up. And all those requests are basically from this other site here. They're just backed up requests. So if I go and reload this now, There's my FoxPro application server that popped up, right? So these are the FoxPro instances that are processing requests. And if I bring this over here, to open this up, if we go inside of here, we can see, and we can post a message, you know. So it's a message board in this case. Well, I don't want to do that. And I can move through here. And you can see the requests are hitting the .NET server, and then they're also hitting the FoxPro server. Each request goes through and does that. So again, that's kind of sidetracking, but I think it's kind of a good example of what you can do with the technology and how you can distribute it. It's a different scenario altogether, right? It's a legacy application, and it's a nice way to have it distributed out like this. Okay, I think that's pretty much it, I think. So I have a summary, and then we're done here. So just to summarize at the very end here, the nice thing about the technology is that it allows us to share executable applications, right? They're very easy to create. We can use existing projects. There's nothing that we really do different in order to use this. It's easy to share. We can use NuGet and all the NuGet infrastructure. So if you've built a NuGet package before, you already know how it works. It's easy to consume. There's single commands, .NET Tool install or .NET Tool update that you can use to actually install this stuff. And then it's easy to manage. You can look at all the components that are installed. You can update them, and you can uninstall them very, very easily. So it's really great for that. So the benefits of all that is it makes it very easy to share stuff. So it helps build community, and it helps basically even yourself to have components that you can easily reuse on another machine or whatnot. So you're not stuck with tools that you build locally, and then you have to make sure that they can run somewhere else. The only requirement for all of that is that you have the .NET Core SDK installed. So it's not a general purpose tool, but it's definitely a tool that for developers makes it very easy to share components. All right, that's all I have for you. So thank you. And again, here's the resource link for the slides and the white paper. So there's actually a document that talks about everything that I talked about today. And then also most of the things that I talked about here, there's links to all the things that you want to, that I talked about here. And then if you need to get a hold of me, feel free to contact me. There's my contact information. All right, thanks all.
Everyone come off mute now and.
All right.
Thanks, Rick.
Yay, thanks, Rick.
Thank you.
Thanks, Rick.
Rick, I think there was things there I might actually be using in the not too distant future.
I wish you hadn't waited so long to get to the FoxPro stuff.
I know you were waiting, weren't you?
I so was. At least you didn't pull out MS Access. I would have had it stick a needle in my eye.
Yeah.
Rick,
I'm sure somebody just quit as soon as I started with the FoxPro. There was somebody who turned off, I'm sure.
I can't remember if I called you at the time, but I worked on a FoxPro, mid-90s FoxPro project a couple years ago.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was neat. All dust. Pre-visual FoxPro.
You'd be surprised how many people still use FoxPro. I mean, I hear from a lot of people because, I don't know, I guess I'm one of the few people that is still around and has, well, a lot of the people that are now still doing FoxPro happen to be using a lot of my stuff. Because, you know, people build web applications, so if they think of FoxPro, they still have to do this. It's crazy that this is still around, but I mean, that's the way it is. You know, there's still probably Fortran and COBOL programs out there that need to be maintained, and so that's the way it goes. That's the real world, right? And to be honest with you, I really love working on this stuff because it gives me the opportunity to play with something that actually is in use with very big applications. There's a number of very, very large applications running on this stuff. I mean, not on this new .NET Core stuff necessarily, but before that, it was all running on .NET. And there's some very large customers running some very big applications on this stuff, even though it's FoxPro, believe it or not. So it wouldn't be my preferred choice, and I try to talk people out of it or slowly migrating over. And also, I provide tools that help with migration to .NET in terms of integrating with .NET from FoxPro. So to get people to kind of think about, you know, extending the functionality of Foxborough into .NET. And then from there, hopefully jump off to something else, anything else.
Anything else?
Okay, so do we have any questions? I'll be happy to take any questions if there are. So I don't know, I probably, now that I'm not talking, I can probably look and see if I can find the comment box here.
If you stop screen sharing, you'll probably find it easier.
Okay.
Yeah, now everyone shows up. And then
Did everybody get the link though? Yeah, everybody got the link?
I actually published the link. That was the first thing in our chat right now.
Okay, good. So then we're good. All right, so
You have to
yeah,
scroll up a bit to get to it, but
yeah, no, it's all right. Okay, so
I also put it on the meetup and I put it into our Slack channel.
okay, cool. So somebody says that VS Code has the ability to sync automatically to Visual Studio snippets. That would be cool. I don't know if that's a thing or not, but.
And that was Chris, and he had just had to drop off because the dog's been out of food all day. So.
Yeah, so I don't know. I don't know whether that's a thing or not. I mean, I know at the time when I built this, there wasn't. Because it was a pain in the butt to create, especially the writer one. So it also does an export to writer. And that's, I don't know how they thought that was a good idea in whatever format they're using.
I'm guessing you could probably do it to a lot of different ones if you wanted to put some implementation behind it.
Okay, I don't see anything else here, but I don't know, maybe from before.
Anyone else have questions?
So you can use Writer. Can you use other JetBrains tools to import to?
Yeah, so only Writer. I only built it for Writer because that's what I use. I mean, WebStorm has a totally different format, which is a pain. It would be really nice if you could do that. And I mean, if there's enough interest, I might do it because I actually use WebStorm quite a bit as well. But it doesn't do it currently. So it only does the format that C# uses. And I think there's Razor templates I think you can import, and the C# files and the VB. I don't know if it's VB. Yeah, VB files. But that's it.
I mean, if you're doing like JavaScript, I mean, of course, it's really JetBrains' fault. But if you're doing JavaScript, it'd be nice to put it like, you know, WebStorm, PHP Storm, Writer, and, you know, all these different things.
Yeah. I mean, basically, I built this thing for myself. I'm not using all of these things, right? I mean, it's open source, so if you want to take a look at it, by all means. But I can just tell you that whatever Writer uses, and also WebStorm, so there's two different formats, and I looked at both of them, and they're both just crazy. They're very, very different, completely different. So there's no similarity between the two, and they're still both really crazy. So.
Yeah, I guess JetBrains is kind of blowing it because, I mean, that would be a really big advantage for them technologically if you could.
Yeah.
Bring things
I would guess that they might even have something in the store by now, maybe. No, at the time, Writer was relatively new when I did this. So I don't know. I haven't looked recently, but it's just something, for me, it's really nice to be able to just have a single store of truth, right? To be able to start with Visual Studio as my base, and then from there I can publish it to the things where I actually need it. But you're right, it would definitely be nice if you could export it to other places as well. It's just extra work, which at this point I'm not willing to do.
Yeah. Thanks.
Did you, Rick, did you see John's question there?
Can
you speak to any security concerns about publishing NuGet packages?
Yes, so there's no review process in NuGet packages. So when you publish it, it just goes live. So if you download it and there's malicious code in there and you add it into your application, obviously, I mean, the same is true for NuGet in general, right? So even if you download a NuGet component, it's theoretically insecure. If you add a component to your application and somehow code gets triggered that has something malicious in it that can do something even inside of your own application. So the same is true for an executable, and it's more acute with the executable, of course, because you can execute it. So yeah, only download stuff that you trust. Yeah, you're right. It's definitely a good way to do that. But
At least NPM packages are secure.
Yeah, exactly. Well, it's the same issue, right? Exactly.
We trust each other as developers, right?
Yeah, but I mean, the idea is also that well, NPM packages, one advantage that NPM has is that everything has to be on GitHub. So if you're using a component from NPM, you know that the source code is there. Now, NuGet, all the components I publish, if I put it on NuGet, it will be, there will be something on GitHub. So I would make that your first requirement. If the code's on GitHub, chances are it's probably safe. But I mean, again, it's how, how do you, you have to make your own judgment on that technology, on the security of that. But clearly Microsoft feels that it's okay because, you know, how Microsoft is with the store and everything, it's so difficult to get something published. It's the opposite, right? And so it's good to have technology that actually has the ability to do this easily. And like I said, if the source code is on GitHub, then at least you can look at the code.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yep.
There's, yeah, and you're, I don't know if you're watching, but Bob's noticing that Nate's got him.
Yeah. Yeah.
Cool.
Anything else?
I'm thrilled to have things that actually might be usable in the near future. Thank you, Rick.
Okay, great.
Does anyone need time to go get a beverage before we go to the afterwards? Jeff says yes.
Yes.
Okay, well, I'm gonna stop recording. So in just a moment, you can say what's really on your mind.